You already know something needs to change. You felt it quiet, persistent, unignorable. You don't lack desire. You don't lack potential. What you've lacked is a system strong enough to carry you forward. Pause. This is not about hype. This is not about waiting to feel ready. This is the moment everything changes for you. Right now, you stop relying on motivation. Right now, you begin building habits that move you, even when your energy is low, even when no one is watching, even when the results are not immediate. Breathe. You are not broken. You are untrained, and training can be learned. Strength can be built. Discipline can become natural. Imagine waking up with clarity. Imagine acting without hesitation. Imagine becoming the person who does what must be done consistently. This ends now. You don't chase success anymore. You build habits that force it. Stand steady. Listen closely. You are becoming someone unstoppable. I am ready. Chapter 1. The Lie of Motivation. Pause. Before you move forward, you need to understand something clearly, something most people never confront. Motivation is not the problem. Motivation is the illusion. You've been told that successful people wake up inspired, that they feel ready, that they feel driven every single day. That story sounds good, but it quietly keeps people stuck because you've waited for motivation before. You've waited for the right mood, the right energy, the right moment. And when it didn't come, you waited longer, not because you're weak, not because you lack ambition, but because you were trained to believe action must follow feeling. Let that sink in. You were taught to move after motivation appears, but winners move before it arrives. Breathe. This chapter is not about blame. It's about truth. Motivation rises. Motivation falls. Some days it shows up strong. Some days it disappears completely. And if your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be unstable. That's not failure. That's physics. Feelings fluctuate. Energy fluctuates. Life fluctuates. But habits execute. They don't ask permission. They don't negotiate with your mood. They don't care if the day feels heavy. Habits move you forward anyway. And that is freedom. You already know this on some level. Think about the days you waited to feel ready. Think about the goals you postponed because the timing didn't feel right. You weren't lazy. You were listening to the wrong signal. Motivation speaks in emotion. Habits speak in action. One is loud but unreliable. The other is quiet but unstoppable. And here's the truth most people avoid. If you only act when you feel like it, you will always be controlled by how you pause. That's not leadership. That's reaction. Leadership begins when action separates from emotion. When you say, I move whether I feel ready or not. That is the moment identity starts to shift. I decide who I become. Now let's talk honestly. There will be days you don't feel strong. Days you don't feel confident. Days you don't feel focused. Those days are not signs to stop. They are training days. Most people interpret resistance as danger. You will learn to interpret resistance as direction. Because every time you act without motivation, you build something far more valuable than inspiration. You build self-trust. You begin proving to yourself, I don't need perfect conditions to move forward. That proof compounds, quietly, daily, relentlessly, and soon motivation becomes irrelevant because you are no longer asking, do I feel like it? You are asking, who am I? And your habits already know the answer. Let's create separation now. You are not your emotions. You are not your thoughts. You are not today's energy level. You are the one who chooses actions despite them. Your old self waited for motivation. Your new self creates momentum. Your old self negotiates. Your new self executes. No anger, no judgment, just clarity. This is not about forcing yourself harshly. This is about leading yourself firmly. Strong, calm, decisive. Stand up, decide. There is relief in this truth. Because if success required constant motivation, only a few would ever achieve it. But success doesn't belong to the most emotional. It belongs to the most consistent. Consistency is not loud. Consistency is not exciting. Consistency is reliable. And reliability builds results. Imagine waking up knowing exactly what you do, regardless of how you feel. Imagine removing daily decision fatigue. Imagine no longer arguing with yourself. You don't need to feel ready. You need a pattern. And patterns create identity. I decide who I become. Now listen closely. Habits are not about punishment. They are about alignment. They align your actions with your future self. Every habit is a vote, not for a goal, but for a person. When you act without motivation, you vote for discipline. When you follow through tired, you vote for resilience. When you show up quietly, you vote for leadership. One vote doesn't change everything, but repeated votes create someone unrecognizable. That's how transformation actually happens, not in moments of hype, but in moments of decision. Here is the command you carry forward. You move even when you don't feel ready. Say it internally. Calm, firm. You move even when you don't feel ready. Not recklessly, not emotionally, but deliberately, because habits don't wait for confidence. Confidence is built by habits. Let that reverse the old belief. You don't become confident, then act. You act, then become confident. This is the law you now live by. Relief comes when you stop fighting yourself, when you stop demanding perfect emotion, when you accept that some days are neutral, some days are heavy, and some days are strong, but all days are usable. And that realization changes everything. You are no longer fragile. You are adaptable. You are no longer dependent on mood. You are grounded in prose. That strength, quiet strength. Now imagine your future self. Not dramatic, not mythical, just steady, focused, grounded. That version of you doesn't wake up asking for motivation. They wake up knowing what's required. They trust themselves because they've proven themselves over and over. That future is not distant. It's built daily, with habits that don't negotiate. Final command for this chapter. Stand up, decide. Decide that motivation is optional. Decide that discipline is learnable. Decide that your actions define you, not your feeling. This is not pressure. This is permission. Permission to move imperfectly. Permission to grow steadily. Permission to lead yourself. I decide who I become. And this decision, made calmly, made clearly, made now, is where everything truly begins. Chapter 2. Identity before action. Breathe. Before you think about what you want, before you think about where you're going, you need to understand who is doing the walking, because goals don't shape behavior. Identity does. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Let that settle. Most people focus on outcomes, results, achievements, but outcomes are the echo. Identity is the voice. What you consistently do is not driven by what you want. It is driven by who you believe you are. And this is not theory. This is lived truth. Think back. How many times have you set a goal with genuine excitement? How many times did you start strong, then slowly drift away? Not because you stopped wanting it, but because your actions returned to what felt familiar. That pull back to the familiar is identity. Your old identity doesn't need motivation to win. It only needs time. And if you don't consciously choose who you're becoming, you will unconsciously remain who you've been. Pause. This chapter is where that changes. You are not here to chase goals. You are here to become someone whose actions align naturally with success, someone whose habits reflect leadership, someone who follows through, not because it's exciting, but because it's who they are. This is where discipline stops feeling like force and starts feeling like self-respect. Let's remove confusion. Identity is not a label. It's not what you say. It's not what you hope. Identity is what you do repeatedly. Every action you take is a vote, not for a goal, for a person. Every time you act with intention, you are saying, "This is who I am." Every time you avoid, delay, or disengage, you are also saying, "This is who I am." No judgment, just awareness, because awareness gives you power. I decide who I become. Now imagine something clearly. Picture a statue. At first, it's just a block, rough, undefined, potential locked inside. No one sees the final form yet. Then the sculptor strikes. One hit, then another, then another. Each strike seems small, almost insignificant, but the sculptor is not guessing. Each strike is intentional. Over time, shape appears, detail emerges, identity becomes visible. This is how you are built, not through one dramatic moment, but through repeated strikes. Habits are the hammer, actions are the strikes, identity is the form reveal. Most people quit because they don't see the statue early enough. You will continue because you trust the process. You don't need proof today. You need alignment today. Alignment between action and identity. When you act like the person you want to become, results eventually follow. But if you wait for results to act differently, you stay exactly where you are. This is the reversal that changes everything. Come now. You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need to become someone else overnight. You need to start acting as if you are disciplined, as if you are focused, as if you are reliable, because acting as if creates evidence, and evidence creates belief. Self-belief is not built by affirmation alone. It is built by behavior you can respect. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your identity strengthens. Quietly, permanently, let tension rise here, because this truth removes excuses. You can no longer say, "I'll act when I feel confident." Confidence is not the cause, it's the result. You don't wait to feel like a leader. You act like one. You don't wait to feel disciplined. You practice discipline. You don't wait to feel strong. You move anyway. Act like the leader now. That command is not aggressive. It's grounding. Leadership is not loud. It's consistent. A leader does what needs to be done, even when it's quiet, even when it's uncomfortable, even when no one is watching. And every time you do that, your nervous system learns, this is safe, this is who we are. That's identity formation. Relief comes when you stop trying to feel like someone new and start behaving like someone new. There is peace in action. There is clarity in follow-through. You don't have to think your way into confidence. You act your way into it. And slowly, internal dialogue changes, not because you forced positivity, but because your actions made doubt unreasonable. Now imagine the compound effect. One aligned action today, another tomorrow, another the next day. You don't feel different at first, but you are different. The statue is taking shape. Your posture changes. Your standards rise. Your tolerance for distraction decreases. Not through pressure, through identity. You begin to say things like, "That's not who I am anymore." And when that happens, habits become effortless. Let's be clear. Discipline is not restriction. Discipline is direction. It directs your energy toward the person you are becoming. And when discipline aligns with identity, it no longer feels heavy. It feels natural. You are not forcing yourself to act. You are expressing who you are. This is where people become consistent, not through willpower, but through self-recognition. Command again. This is who you are. Say it internally, not emotionally. Matter of fact, this is who you are. Someone who shows up, someone who follows through, someone who keeps promises, especially the quiet ones. You don't need applause. You don't need permission. Your identity is internal. Now empowerment. From this moment forward, you ask a new question. Not what do I want, but who would do this? Who would train today? Who would prepare quietly? Who would stay focused? And then you act accordingly. Every time, even when it's small, especially when it's small, because small strikes shape the statue. You are becoming the person who wins. Not loudly, not desperately, but steadily, deliberately, intentionally, and the world will eventually notice. But by then, you won't need it to. I decide who I become. This chapter doesn't end with hype. It ends with identity. And identity, once formed, carries you forward without resistance. Stay aligned. The statue is already taking shape. Chapter 3, The Discipline Muscle. Slow down. Before you judge yourself, before you label yourself as inconsistent or undisciplined, you need to understand this clearly. Discipline is not something you are born with. It is not a personality trait. It is not a gift given to a few and denied to the rest. Discipline is trained, and anything that is trained can be built. Let that calm you, because if discipline were inherited, improvement would be impossible. But discipline is learned through repetition, not talent. You are not behind. You are in training. Most people misunderstand discipline. They imagine it as force, as pressure, as something harsh and exhausting. That misunderstanding is why they avoid it. But discipline is not punishment. It is conditioning. Just like a muscle does not grow because it feels strong. It grows because it meets resistance. Small resistance, repeated resistance, and that resistance, applied consistently, changes everything. Think about this honestly. No one walks into a gym strong. Strength is built after weakness is exposed. The first lift feels heavy, uncomfortable, sometimes embarrassing, but the body adapts. And what once felt impossible becomes normal. Discipline works the same way. At first, doing the right thing feels difficult. not because you are incapable, but because the muscle is untrained. And untrained muscles always resist effort. That resistance is not failure. It is feedback. Breathe. You don't need extreme discipline. You need repeatable discipline. You don't need heroic effort. You need daily effort. Small, controlled, consistent. This is where real power is built. Let's introduce tension now, because this truth removes another illusion. You do not wait until discipline feels natural. It will not feel natural at first. It will feel awkward, slow, uncomfortable, and that discomfort is the signal that growth is happening. If you only act when discipline feels easy, you are not training it. You are avoiding resistance. And without resistance, nothing strengthens. Delayed gratification enters here. This is where most people turn back, because delayed gratification asks you to act today for results you won't see immediately. It asks you to trust the process instead of chasing instant reward. That is not weakness. That is maturity. And maturity is strength. You begin learning to tolerate discomfort, not dramatically, not emotionally, calmly. You feel resistance, and you move anyway. You don't argue with it. You don't dramatize it. You simply acknowledge it. Then you act. That is training. Command gently but firmly. Do it anyway. Not angrily, not forcefully, just decisively. Do it anyway. Because every time you do, the disciplined muscle receives a signal. And the signal says, this is who we are now. At first, the signal feels weak, but repetition strengthens it. Day after day, action after action, and something subtle begins to happen. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop overthinking. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, because your body and mind recognize the pattern. This is what we do. Relief comes here, because you realize discipline is not about intensity. It is about familiarity. The more often you act with discipline, the less emotional energy it requires. Eventually, discipline feels neutral. And neutral is powerful. Neutral means automatic. Automatic means reliable. Quiet self-trust begins to form. Not confidence you announce. Confidence you feel. You trust yourself because you've seen yourself follow through. Again, and again, and again. That trust cannot be shaken by mood, because it was built without mood. Now build tension again, because this is where most people underestimate themselves. They think discipline must look extreme. Long hours, total sacrifice, relentless pressure. But discipline grows best under sustainable load. Just like a muscle, too much weight breaks form. Too little weight produces nothing. The right resistance produces strength, and you are learning to choose the right resistance. One small discipline action today is more powerful than a burst of motivation tomorrow, because motivation fades, but discipline compounds. Every small win stacks, and stacking wins creates dominance, not loud dominance, internal dominance, the kind where you know you can rely on yourself. Command again. Do it anyway, even when it's boring, even when it's repetitive, even when no one notices. Especially then, because that is where discipline is forged. Notice something now. The voice that once said, "Not today," starts losing authority, not because you fought it, but because you stopped obeying it. And voices lose power when they are ignored. Relief again. You don't need to eliminate resistance. You only need to stop letting it decide. Resistance can exist, discomfort can exist, and you still move. That is strength. That is leadership over self. Now empowerment. You begin to see discipline differently, not as restriction, but as reliability, not as pressure, but as preparation, not as force, but as self-respect. Because when you train discipline, you are telling yourself, I matter enough to follow through. That message changes identity. You are stronger than yesterday. Say it internally, not emotionally. Factually, you are stronger than yesterday, because you trained, and strength trained yesterday is available today. Now imagine the future version of you. Not extreme, not dramatic, just solid. That version of you doesn't rely on hype. They rely on habits. They don't question whether they'll act. They already know. And that certainty is calming. Let's repeat the cycle. Calm. Discipline is trained. You are training it. Tension. Resistance will show up. It always does. Command. Do it anyway. Relief. You followed through. Again. Empowerment. You are becoming reliable. This cycle is the system. You don't break yourself to grow. You train yourself. and training respects recovery, patience, and repetition. Final command for this chapter. Say it clearly. You are stronger than yesterday. Because discipline does not appear suddenly. It accumulates quietly, and one day you look back and realize you are no longer the same person. Not because of motivation, but because you trained yourself to move, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was quiet, even when it was hard. And that training, that discipline muscle, now works for you, automatically, calm, steady, unstoppable. I decide who I become. This chapter ends here, but the training continues. Chapter 4, Designing a Life That Pushes You Forward. Settle your breath. This chapter is quieter than the others, but it may be one of the most powerful, because this is where effort begins to disappear. Not because you try harder, but because you design smarter. You have been told to rely on willpower, to stay strong, to push through. And while willpower has its place, it was never meant to carry everything. Willpower is temporary, environment is constant, and what surrounds you shapes you, whether you notice it or not. This is not philosophy, this is reality. Look closely at your own life. Notice what makes things easy. Notice what makes things difficult. You don't repeatedly do what's hardest. You repeatedly do what's available, what's visible, what's convenient, what's frictionless. This is not a flaw. This is human nature. And once you understand it, you stop fighting yourself and start leading yourself. Calm now. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more discipline. You need better design. Design that quietly nudges you forward, even on days you feel neutral, even on days you feel tired, even on days you don't feel like trying. That is real power. Let's introduce the core truth. Your environment is either pushing you forward or pulling you backward. There is no neutral. Every object, habit, cue, routine, and space is voting for a version of you, and those votes add up. Most people think success is about strength of character, but strength without structure gets exhausted. Structure without emotion gets results. This chapter is about building structure. That makes the right actions easier and the wrong actions inconvenient. Not impossible, just inconvenient. That difference changes everything. Let tension rise here, because this truth removes another illusion. You cannot outwill a poorly designed environment forever. If distractions are always within reach, discipline will eventually fatigue. If progress requires constant resistance, energy will eventually drain. This is not weakness. This is physics, and leaders respect physics. Now the metaphor. Imagine a line of dominoes, each one carefully placed, each one positioned intentionally. At first glance, nothing is happening. Then one small push, and everything moves. That is how progress should feel. Not forced, not dramatic, inevitable. You are not here to push every domino manually. You are here to set them up, so that when life applies pressure, and it will, the system works for you, not against you. Calm again. This is where strategic self-leadership begins. Leadership is not just about making decisions in the moment. It's about making decisions in advance. Decisions that protect your future self from unnecessary struggle, silent preparation, quiet dominance. Let's be practical without being technical. Start with visibility. What you see repeatedly, you engage with. What you don't see, you forget. If progress is hidden, it becomes optional. If distraction is visible, it becomes automatic. So leaders flip that equation. They bring good habits forward. They push bad habits back. No drama, no speeches, just placement. Notice the shift. You are no longer asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" You are asking, "Is this easy to do?" And when the right action is easy, it happens more often. That's not cheating. That's intelligent. Now build tension again, because this requires honesty. Some of your environment was built by accident. Some of it was built by habit. Some of it was built by an older version of you, and it may no longer match who you are becoming. That's not failure. That's evolution. You don't need to remove everything. You don't need to isolate yourself. You need to adjust friction. Lower friction for what builds you. Increase friction for what drains you. Even slightly. Small changes compound. Command softly but clearly. Design your default. Don't rely on decision-making at the moment of weakness. Design so that the right choice is the default choice. When you do this, willpower becomes a backup, not the main engine. Relief enters here, because you realize you don't have to fight every urge. You don't have to win every internal debate. You simply create fewer debates, and peace comes from fewer battles. Think about this. How much energy have you spent arguing with yourself, negotiating, postponing, rationalizing? That energy can now be redirected into quiet execution. That's relief. Now empowerment. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who struggles for control, but as someone who builds systems that carry you forward, even when your attention is elsewhere. That's maturity. That's leadership. Silent preparation deserves emphasis. The most powerful changes are rarely announced. They happen quietly. Rearranged spaces, adjusted routines, subtle boundaries. No one applauds them, but they work. And working systems build confidence faster than praise ever could. Let's deepen this. Environment is not just physical. It's mental, digital, emotional. What you repeatedly expose yourself to becomes part of your internal landscape. So leaders curate, not aggressively, intentionally. They choose inputs carefully, because inputs shape outputs. Command again. Choose what surrounds you, not perfectly, but deliberately, because whatever you tolerate consistently becomes normal, and normal determines behavior. Relief again. You are no longer relying on constant vigilance. You are building alignment between who you want to become and what your life encourages. That alignment reduces friction internally, and when internal friction drops, momentum increases. Now imagine the future version of you again. They are not constantly trying to be disciplined. They are simply moving through a well-designed life. One action leads naturally to the next. No heroics, no burnout, just flow. That future is not far away. It is built through design. Empowerment rises here. You stop seeing discipline as pressure. You start seeing it as architecture. You are building a structure that supports your growth. Walls that protect focus. Openings that invite progress. That is self-respect in physical form. Listener affirmation softly. I rise. Not loudly, not suddenly, but steadily. Repeat the rhythm. Calm. Your environment shapes you. Tension. If you don't design it, it designs you. Command. Design your life intentionally. Relief. Less resistance, more flow. Empowerment. You are no longer fighting forward progress. One more layer. Engineering inevitability does not mean control. It means preparation. It means when motivation fades. And it will. Your system continues. It means success becomes less about effort and more about structure. That's sustainability. Final commands for this chapter. Design the path. Place the dominoes. Trust the push. You don't need to force greatness. You need to remove what blocks it. And once the path is clear, forward movement becomes natural. Calm, prepared, intentional. I rise. This chapter ends here, but the environment you build now will keep pushing you forward long after this moment passes. Chapter 5. Consistency beats intensity. Slow your breath. This chapter is not about pushing harder. It's about letting go of pressure, because the truth is simple and powerful. Success is not built in moments of intensity. It is built in moments of return. Return after boredom. Return after doubt. Return after nothing seems to change. That return is consistency. Most people believe change must feel dramatic. They expect a surge, a breakthrough, a moment that changes everything. And when life feels ordinary instead, they assume something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. Ordinary is where transformation lives. Calm now. You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need to reinvent yourself every week. You don't need to burn bright. Burning bright burns out. Consistency burns steady, and steady lasts. Let's name the trap clearly. Intensity feels productive. It feels powerful. It feels like progress. But intensity is emotional, and emotions fluctuate. One intense week followed by collapse does not build momentum. It builds frustration. You've seen this before. You start strong. You give everything. You push hard. And then life happens. Energy dips. Focus fades. The pace becomes unsustainable. And the story repeats. Not because you lack strength, but because intensity was doing a job that consistency was meant to do. Now let tension rise. Because this truth challenges ego. Consistency is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel heroic. And that's exactly why it works. Consistency does not seek validation. It seeks alignment. Think long-term, not days, not weeks, years. What matters is not how hard you push once, but how often you return. Returning builds trust. Trust builds confidence. Confidence builds identity. This is how winners are built. Let that line settle. This is how winners are built. Not in sprints, in steps, not in extremes, in rhythms. Calm again. Consistency is not boring. It is stabilizing. It removes anxiety, because when you know, you will show up again. Today doesn't have to be perfect. Perfection is pressure. Consistency is permission. Permission to move forward imperfectly. Now we introduce patience. Patience is not waiting. Patience is staying engaged without demanding immediate reward. That is power, because impatience causes people to quit too early. Consistency allows time to do its work. You begin trusting something deeper. The process, not blindly, not emotionally, but because you've seen evidence. Each day you show up, you reinforce a quiet truth. I am someone who returns, and returning matters more than intensity ever will. Command gently now. Show up again, not harder, not louder. Again, this is where anxiety dissolves. When you stop asking, is this enough today? And start asking, did I return? Because return is controllable. Results are delayed. Consistency is immediate. And control reduces stress. Let's build tension again. Many people quit not because the work is hard, but because progress is slow. But slow progress is still progress. Invisible progress is still progress. Roots grow underground before anything appears above. That does not mean nothing is happening. It means everything is aligning. Consistency teaches patience. Patience teaches confidence, because when you no longer rush outcomes, you stop panicking, and calm execution beats frantic effort every time. Command again. Show up again, even when it feels repetitive, even when it feels quiet, even when it feels small. Especially then, relief comes when you realize you are no longer chasing motivation. You are following a rhythm, and rhythms are easier to sustain than surges. Let's speak about trust. Trust is not blind belief. Trust is earned through repetition. Every time you show up, you deposit proof. Proof that you can be relied on, not by others, by yourself. That is the foundation of confidence. Empowerment begins here. You stop needing external reassurance, because your consistency reassures you. You don't need hype. You have history, and history speaks louder than emotion. Now imagine this clearly. A year of moderate effort, a year of daily return, a year of steady execution. Compare that to a few intense weeks scattered across months. There is no comparison. One builds identity, the other builds exhaustion. Consistency beats intensity, because consistency compounds. Small actions multiply over time. They build skill, they build resilience, they build certainty, and certainty creates calm leadership. Command with strength now. This is how winners are built, not when they feel unstoppable, but when they feel ordinary, and still return. Let relief wash through. You no longer need to rush. You no longer need to prove anything today. You just need to show up. And tomorrow, you show up again. That is enough. Now empowerment. You are learning to trust time. Time plus consistency creates results without panic. And panic has never built anything sustainable. Repeat the rhythm. Calm. Small actions matter. Tension. Progress is slower than ego wants. Command. Show up again. Relief. You did your part today. Empowerment. You are becoming consistent. Let's anchor identity now. You are not someone who starts and stops. You are someone who returns. That sentence alone changes behavior, because returning is simpler than restarting. Final commands for this chapter. Lower the drama. Raise the consistency. Trust the process. Respect time. Show up again. This is how winners are built. Quietly, steadily, inevitably. And you are one of them. I decide who I become. Chapter 6. The War with Your Old Self. Be still for a moment. This chapter is not loud at the beginning. It doesn't rush you, because what you are about to face deserves clarity, not chaos. There comes a point in growth where effort alone is not enough, where systems are built, habits are forming, momentum is real, and yet something pulls back, not from the outside, from within. That pull is not weakness. It is familiarity. It is your old self asking to remain in control. This is where growth becomes personal. Not technical, not strategic. Personal, because growth requires confrontation. Not with the world, not with other people, with who you used to be. Calm now. Your old self is not the enemy. Your old self kept you safe once. It helped you survive uncertainty, fear, discomfort. That version of you did its job. But survival is not the same as expansion. And what once protected you can now limit you. This is not betrayal. This is evolution. You vs who you were. This is the war. And it is quiet at first. It shows up as hesitation, as familiar excuses, as subtle urges to return to what feels known. Not dramatic resistance, comfortable resistance. Let tension begin to rise. Your old patterns don't attack you aggressively. They whisper, slow down, you've done enough, you can relax now. And those whispers are dangerous because they sound reasonable. Here is the truth. Your old self does not want to disappear. It wants to negotiate. It wants compromise. Do a little but not too much. Change but not fully. Grow but stay familiar. And this is where most people stall. Not because they fail, but because they stop choosing. Pause. This chapter is not about shame. There is nothing wrong with who you were, but there is a cost to staying there, and avoiding that truth delays everything. Let's be clear. Growth requires loss. Not loss of value, loss of identity. You cannot become someone new while clinging tightly to who you were. Something must loosen. Something must be released. Let that create tension, because release feels like danger to the nervous system. Even when the thing you're releasing is holding you back, the brain prefers familiarity over progress. That's not a flaw. That's biology. And leaders learn to move beyond biology. Calm again. You are not fighting yourself violently. You are outgrowing yourself deliberately. This is not a battle of anger. It is a battle of choice. Over and over. Let's speak about patterns. Patterns are efficient. They conserve energy. Your old self is built from patterns that worked before. But just because something worked once does not mean it still serves you. And the hardest patterns to release are the ones that feel comfortable. Here is the confrontation. You must look at your old behaviors without judgment and say, this got me here, but it will not take me further. That statement is strength. Now tension rises further because your old self resists being left behind. It uses guilt. Why are you changing? Who do you think you are now? You were fine before. Those voices are not truth. They are echoes. Echoes of identity losing control. Do not argue with them. Arguing gives them power. Choose instead. Choice dissolves internal conflict. Command softly now. Choose growth. Not dramatically, not emotionally. Quietly. You are not erasing your past. You are integrating it. You keep the lessons. You release the limitations. That is maturity. Now the emotional intensity builds. Because this is where discomfort sharpens. You will feel moments of resistance that make no logical sense. Moments where progress feels heavy, even when everything is working. That heaviness is the old self weakening, and weakening feels like danger to something that once ruled. This is where many people stop, not because they can't continue, but because stopping feels relieving, familiar, safe. But you are not here for familiar. You are here for alignment, and alignment sometimes requires discomfort. Command now with clarity. Keep going. Say it again internally. Keep going. This is not about pushing harder. It is about refusing to retreat. Let's deepen the confrontation. Your old self had limits. Limits around effort. Limits around consistency. Limits around belief. Those limits were learned, which means they can be unlearned. But unlearning feels like instability at first. And instability feels threatening. This is where resolve matters. Resolve is not loud motivation. Resolve is quiet commitment. It says, I don't need certainty to move forward. Command again. Don't stop. Feel the intensity now. Your old habits are losing authority, and authority never leaves peacefully. It resists. It tests. It waits for you to hesitate. This is the critical moment, not dramatic, decisive. If you move now, the old pattern weakens. If you hesitate, it regains strength. Command again faster. Keep going. Don't stop. This is working. Say that calmly. This is working. That sentence matters because growth often feels wrong before it feels right, and clarity prevents retreat. Transformation peak 1 begins here. Rapid lines. Short, focused, no emotion, just truth. Keep going, don't stop. This is working. Keep going, don't stop. This is working. You are not breaking. You are shedding. You are not failing. You are separating. The old identity is loosening. Breathe. Let the release come. Relief enters now, because once the old self loses control, it no longer argues. It fades quietly, and what replaces it is not pressure. It is calm. You feel steadier, not euphoric, grounded, because conflict drains energy. Resolution restores it. Now empowerment. You realize something powerful. You can choose again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, and each choice weakens the old pattern further, until one day, it no longer appears. This is strength through choice, not force, not aggression. Choice. You let go without guilt, because guilt belongs to attachment, and you are no longer attached to who you were. You respect them, but you do not obey them. Now imagine your future self. They are not haunted by old patterns. They are not arguing internally. They move cleanly, decisively, because the war was faced and resolved. Final commands for this chapter. Honor who you were. Release who you are no longer. Choose who you are becoming. Keep going. Don't stop. This is working. Calm settles. The conflict is past. And what remains is clarity. This chapter ends not with noise, but with resolve. Quiet, firm, unshakable. I decide who I become. The war is not endless. You faced it, and you won. Chapter 7. Silence, focus, and personal power. Slow your breath. This chapter does not rush you. It narrows you, because what you are building now does not need noise. It needs precision. There comes a stage in growth where loud effort becomes unnecessary, where explaining yourself becomes optional, where proving yourself becomes irrelevant. This is that stage, and it begins with silence. Silence is misunderstood. People think silence means weakness, that if you're not announcing your progress, it must not be real. But silence is not absence. Silence is concentration, and concentration is power. Calm now. You are not hiding. You are sharpening, like a blade refined away from distraction, away from applause, away from unnecessary friction. A blade is not sharpened in a crowd. It is sharpened in stillness. Focus is the byproduct of silence. When you remove the need for validation, your attention returns to what matters, not what looks impressive, not what gets noticed, what works. This chapter is about internal validation, about learning to move without being seen, to improve without being praised, to grow without being witnessed. This is where momentum becomes unstoppable. Let tension begin to rise, because silence challenges the ego. The ego wants recognition. It wants reassurance. It wants feedback before commitment. But growth does not wait for approval, and neither will you. There is a moment where you realize something uncomfortable. Most distraction is not external. It is emotional. It comes from the desire to be acknowledged, to be affirmed, to be told you're doing well. That desire is human, but leadership requires independence from it. Calm again. You are not removing emotion. You are mastering it. You are choosing focus over noise. When you stop explaining your plans, you gain time. When you stop defending your choices, you gain energy. When you stop seeking approval, you gain clarity. That clarity compounds. Focus becomes your advantage, because most people cannot maintain it. They scatter attention. They chase reactions. They dilute effort. You concentrate, and concentration multiplies force. Command softly now. Narrow your focus. This is not about isolation. It's about intention. You decide what deserves your attention. You decide what does not. That decision alone separates leaders from followers. Relief enters here, because when you stop performing, you stop feeling watched. And when you stop feeling watched, you relax into execution. Relaxed execution is powerful. You no longer rush. You no longer overreact. You move deliberately, and deliberate movement outperforms frantic motion every time. Let's deepen this. Emotional independence is the ability to act correctly without emotional reinforcement, to show up without encouragement, to continue without applause. This is rare, and rarity creates advantage. Build tension again. At first, silence feels uncomfortable because you're used to feedback, used to response, used to reaction. Silence removes those signals, and without signals, you must trust yourself. That trust is not automatic. It is trained. Command now. Trust your work. Every focused action completed in silence builds internal credibility. You begin to believe yourself because you keep your word, not publicly, privately. That belief is unshakable. Relief again. You realize you don't need to be seen to be effective, and effectiveness is what actually matters. The blade metaphor returns here. A dull blade makes noise. It requires force. It struggles. A sharp blade is quiet. It moves cleanly, efficiently, precisely. You are sharpening now. Empowerment rises. Your confidence becomes internal, not dependent on reaction, not shaken by indifference. You are grounded, and grounded people are difficult to stop. Repeat the rhythm. Calm. Silence focuses you. Tension. The ego resists silence. Command. Stay quiet, stay sharp. Relief. You feel centered. Empowerment. Your power grows. Now imagine your future self again. They are not constantly updating others. They are not over-explaining. They are working, and the results speak when it matters. Final command for this chapter. Sharpen in silence. Focus without distraction. Move without validation. Power does not announce itself. It arrives prepared. I am ready. This chapter ends here, but your focus, once claimed, stays with you. Quiet, precise, unstoppable. Chapter 8. Building systems that carry you. Settle in. This chapter is about weight. Not the weight you carry, but the weight you no longer have to. Because there comes a point in growth where effort alone becomes inefficient, where ambition without structure becomes overwhelming, and where willpower, no matter how strong, was never meant to manage everything. This is where systems enter. Calm first. You don't need to want success more. You don't need to visualize harder. You don't need to push yourself constantly. You need something more reliable. You need structure, because goals inspire, but systems execute. Goals point the direction. Systems move the body. Goals live in the future. Systems live in the present, and the present is where progress actually happens. Most people misunderstand why they feel overwhelmed. They think it's because they want too much, or because they lack focus. But often, overwhelm comes from something simpler. Too many decisions, too many choices, too many moments where you have to ask, what should I do next? Decision after decision drains energy, and drained energy leads to hesitation. Calm again. You are not overwhelmed because you are incapable. You are overwhelmed because you are carrying what a system should be carrying. Leaders do not rely on memory. They rely on structure. Let tension begin to rise, because this truth removes another illusion. You cannot think your way through every day forever. If every action requires motivation, clarity, and emotional readiness, eventually something gives. Not because you failed, but because the load was wrong. Systems remove load. They decide once, so you don't have to decide again. That is their power. Now let's define this clearly. A system is not a rigid prison. It is a supportive framework. It does not restrict you. It carries you. It holds progress steady. When emotion fluctuates, think about the days you moved effortlessly. Days where momentum felt natural, where you didn't overthink. Those days weren't magic. They were structured. You knew what came next. And knowing what comes next creates calm. Calm again. Structure reduces anxiety, because anxiety thrives in uncertainty. When you don't know what to do, your mind fills the gap with doubt. Systems remove that gap. They say, here, this is the next step. Now build tension. Ambition without systems is chaos. You want many things. You care deeply. You see potential. But without structure, that energy disperses. And dispersed energy does not build momentum. It creates frustration. This chapter gives ambition a container, so it stops leaking. Here is the core truth. You do not rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. Say it internally. You fall to your systems, because when motivation fades, and it always does, systems remain. Command softly now. Follow the system. This command is not passive. It is intelligent surrender. You are not giving up control. You are giving control to something you design. That's leadership. Let's talk about automation. Automation is not laziness. It is foresight. When something is automated, it happens without negotiation. And negotiation is where progress slows. Every repeated action should eventually become automatic. Not because you stop caring, but because caring is expensive. Attention is limited, and leaders protect their attention. Calm again. Systems protect energy. They reduce decision fatigue. They free your mind to focus on what actually requires thinking, creativity, strategy, adaptation, not basic execution. Now tension again. Most people romanticize flexibility. They want freedom every day. But total freedom creates constant decision-making, and constant decision-making creates exhaustion. Structure creates a different kind of freedom. Freedom from indecision, freedom from chaos, freedom from asking yourself the same questions every day. Command again. Let it carry you. That line matters, because you do not need to push yourself every moment. You need to be carried by what you already built. That is maturity. Relief enters here. You realize something important. You don't need to feel motivated to move forward anymore. You don't need to negotiate with yourself. You simply follow the system, and movement happens. Now let's speak about self-trust. Self-trust does not come from intention. It comes from reliability, and reliability comes from systems. When you follow a structure consistently, you begin to trust yourself, because you no longer depend on mood. This trust is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, but it stabilizes you. Empowerment begins to rise. You are no longer improvising your future. You are executing a plan, not rigidly, not obsessively, steadily. Now imagine your day. You wake up. You don't ask, "What should I do?" You already know. That knowing removes friction, and frictionless movement builds momentum. Repeat the rhythm. Calm. Systems create clarity. Tension. Without them, ambition overwhelms. Command. Follow the system. Relief. Less thinking, more doing. Empowerment. You trust yourself again. Let's deepen the lesson. Systems are not built to be perfect. They are built to be used. Perfection delays execution. Usable systems create progress. You are allowed to adjust systems, but you do not abandon them emotionally. You refine them logically. That distinction matters. Build tension again. Many people quit systems at the first sign of discomfort, but discomfort does not mean the system is broken. It means you are adapting. Command again. Let it carry you, even when it feels repetitive, even when it feels ordinary, because repetition is what makes systems powerful. Relief returns. You realize you no longer have to remember everything. You no longer have to decide everything, and that mental space feels lighter. Empowerment now. You begin operating like a leader, not reacting to the day, but moving through it with intention. Structure. Ray gives you leverage. Leverage multiplies effort. Now imagine pressure, unexpected demands, busy days, low energy moments. This is where systems prove their worth. They do not collapse under pressure. They carry you through it. Calm again. This is why systems outperform goals. Goals inspire when things are easy. Systems perform when things are not. Final commands for this chapter. Build structure. Reduce decisions. Trust the system. Follow the system. Let it carry you. You are no longer relying on hope. You are relying on design. And design, when used consistently, creates inevitability. Calm, grounded, forward-moving. I decide who I become. This chapter ends here, but the system you build now will continue moving you long after emotion fades. Chapter 9, Pressure Creates Leaders. Slow your breath. This chapter begins where comfort ends. Not suddenly, not violently, but clearly, because pressure has arrived. And pressure is not here to break you. It is here to reveal you. Most people misunderstand pressure. They see it as a threat, as something to escape, as a sign that something has gone wrong. But pressure is not punishment. Pressure is responsibility. And responsibility is what leadership grows from. Calm now. You are not under pressure because you are weak. You are under pressure because you are capable. Life does not demand more from those who cannot handle it. Pressure is a signal. It says, you are ready for more. This chapter reframes everything. Pressure is not something to survive. Pressure is something to stand inside. Present, grounded, aware. Let tension rise. Pressure compresses time. It forces decisions. It removes comfort. It strips away excess. Under pressure, you cannot hide behind excuses. You must choose, and choice reveals character. Most people react to pressure. They rush. They panic. They scatter attention. But leaders respond. They slow the breath. They stabilize the body. They narrow focus. Command softly now. Breathe. That is not a relaxation technique. That is leadership in motion. Because when you control your breath, you control your nervous system. And when you control your nervous system, you control your actions. Pressure tests presence. Can you stay here without escaping into fear? Can you remain calm without freezing? Can you think clearly without rushing? These are not traits you are born with. They are skills, and skills are trained. Calm again. You have already trained for this. Every disciplined action, every system you built, every moment you showed up quietly, all of it prepared you. Pressure is not new. It is simply louder now. Let tension increase. Pressure removes options, and when options disappear, priorities become visible. What truly matters surfaces. What does not falls away. This clarity is uncomfortable, but it is powerful. Here is the shift. Pressure is not asking you to be perfect. Pressure is asking you to be present, to see clearly, to act deliberately, to choose intentionally. Command again. Hold steady. Steadiness is not passive. It is active restraint. It is choosing not to overreact. It is choosing not to abandon your principles for temporary relief. That choice defines leaders. Many people wait for pressure to pass before they act. Leaders act within pressure, because pressure is where decisions matter most. Now let relief appear briefly. You don't need to solve everything at once. Pressure often feels overwhelming because the mind jumps too far ahead. Leaders bring attention back to the next step, to the next decision, to the present moment. Empowerment begins here. You realize pressure cannot control you unless you surrender presence, and you are not surrendering. Build tension again. There is a moment under pressure where you feel the urge to rush, to act just to feel relief. That urge is dangerous because rushed action creates mistakes, and mistakes compound pressure. Command firmly now. Slow is smooth. Smooth is decisive. You begin to understand something deeper. Pressure does not require speed. It requires clarity, and clarity comes from calm presence. Transformation peak 2 approaches, because this is where identity locks in. Not when things are easy, but when stakes are real. Rapid lines begin. Breathe. Hold steady. This is the moment. Not dramatic. Defining. You choose presence over panic. You choose composure over chaos. You choose leadership. Rapid lines intensify. Breathe. Hold steady. You lead now. Say it internally. You lead now. Not later. Not when pressure fades. Now. Pressure does not wait. Leadership does not hesitate. The peak continues. Breathe. Hold steady. You lead now. Breathe. Hold steady. You lead now. This is working, even if it feels intense. Even if your heart is fast. Presence is holding. Now release. Let the intensity settle. Feel the calm beneath the pressure. It was always there. Relief enters. You realize something profound. Pressure did not break you. It clarified you. Empowerment now. You trust yourself under weight. That trust is earned, and it does not fade. From this point forward, pressure changes meaning. It is no longer a threat. It is a signal that leadership is required, and you answer. Final commands for this chapter. Stay present. Breathe deliberately. Choose clarity. Pressure creates leaders, and you are becoming one. Calm, composed, decisive. I decide who I become. This chapter ends here, but the leader it revealed remains with you whenever pressure returns, and it will. You are ready. Chapter 10, Becoming Unrecognizable. Slow your breath. This chapter does not begin with effort. It begins with awareness, because something has changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but undeniably. You may not have noticed it at first. That's how real change works. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly, day by day, choice by choice, action by action. And then one day, you realize you are no longer the same person. Calm now. This chapter is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming yourself, without the limits you once carried. Change compounds quietly. That truth is easy to hear, harder to trust, because the human mind wants proof immediately. It wants confirmation, recognition, feedback. But compounding works in silence, just like interest, just like strength, just like identity. Think back. Remember the early days of this journey. The effort felt heavy. The discipline felt unfamiliar. The progress felt invisible. And yet, you kept going. That matters, because consistency plants seed. long before it grows confidence. Calm again. You didn't change overnight. You changed gradually, and gradual change lasts. Here's the shift happening now. You no longer question every decision. You no longer debate every action. You no longer need constant reassurance. You move with quiet certainty, not arrogance, not urgency. Certainty. Let tension rise slightly, because this certainty challenges the old identity, the old voice that once said, "Are you sure?" That voice is softer now, not because you silenced it forcibly, but because your actions outgrew it. Confidence through proof. That is the kind of confidence that cannot be shaken. Not confidence built on words, but confidence built on evidence. You've seen yourself follow through. You've seen yourself stay disciplined. You've seen yourself handle pressure. Again, and again, and again. That proof accumulates. This confidence does not rush. It doesn't need to impress anyone. It is personal, and personal confidence is the strongest kind. Now look at your long-term vision. Not dramatically, clearly. You no longer fantasize wildly. You plan realistically, because you trust execution. Vision becomes grounded. When identity stabilizes, this is what it feels like. When the foundation is solid, you stop chasing validation. You stop chasing shortcuts. You respect time, because time has worked for you. Build tension again. There is a moment here where you realize something uncomfortable. Some people will not recognize you, not because you became distant, but because you evolved. And evolution creates contrast. Let this be clear. Outgrowing old limitations does not mean rejecting your past. It means releasing its authority. You honor who you were, but you do not return there. Command softly now. Keep going forward. Becoming unrecognizable is not about appearance. It's about standards. Your standards are higher now, not harsh. Clear. You know what you tolerate. You know what you don't. And that clarity protects you. Relief enters here. You are no longer fighting yourself. Internal conflict has quieted because your actions align with your values. Alignment creates peace. Personal pride emerges, not pride that needs attention, pride that is internal, the kind that shows up when you keep promises to yourself, the kind that doesn't need explanation. Empowerment now. You realize something powerful. You are not trying anymore. You are doing, and doing builds identity faster than thinking ever could. Repeat the rhythm. Change compounds. Tension. Doubt fades as proof grows. Command. Stay consistent. Relief. You trust yourself. Empowerment. You move with certainty. Now imagine someone watching you quietly, not judging, just observing. They see consistency. They see focus. They see composure. They may not know when it happened, but they can see that it did. You are different, but here is the most important part. You notice it first. You feel it internally. The steadiness, the confidence, the self-respect. That feeling does not come from success. Success comes from that feeling. Build tension gently, because this is where complacency tempts people. When progress feels stable, some stop refining, but you are not stopping. You are consolidating, strengthening what you've built. Command again. Honor the process. You don't rush the next phase. You don't abandon the structure. You protect it, because this version of you was built deliberately, and deliberate things are worth protecting. Relief again. You don't need to prove how far you've come. You know, and knowing is enough. Empowerment deepens. You begin thinking in years, not weeks, not months, years, because your confidence is no longer fragile. It is patient. Now the affirmation sent. Easy and clear. I decide who I become. Not once, but continuously. Becoming unrecognizable is not about losing yourself. It's about shedding what no longer fits. Doubt, inconsistency, hesitation, they no longer define you. Final commands for this chapter. Respect the compound. Trust the timeline. Stay aligned. You are becoming unrecognizable to your old limits, and unmistakable to your future. Calm, certain, grounded. I decide who I become. This chapter closes here, but the identity it confirms will keep unfolding quietly until success is no longer questioned, only expected. Chapter 11, Living in Alignment. Breathe. This chapter arrives like exhale after long effort, not because the work is over, but because the struggle has changed. Something has settled, and you can feel it. For a long time, progress required force, attention, discipline, intentional effort. You had to remind yourself who you were becoming. You had to choose carefully. Now something is different. Your habits are no longer pulling in opposite directions. They are moving together. This is alignment, and alignment simplifies everything. Calm now. Alignment is not perfection. It is coherence. It is when your values, your actions, and your goals stop arguing with each other. When what you believe and what you do begin to match, that harmony creates relief. You no longer wake up with internal friction. You don't feel split, one part wanting growth, another resisting it. That internal war has quieted because your habits are now speaking the same language as your values. Let this land. Most exhaustion is not physical. It is internal conflict. When your actions contradict your standard, your energy leaks. Alignment seals those leaks. Calm again. You are not forcing discipline anymore. You are expressing it. You are not chasing motivation. You are following direction. Life becomes simpler, not because it is easier, but because it is clearer. Now let tension rise slightly. Alignment requires honesty, because to live in alignment, you must stop tolerating misalignment. Small compromises, subtle avoidance, quiet excuses, they no longer fit. And letting them go requires resolve. But here is the relief. You are not fighting temptation constantly anymore, because temptation loses power. When identity is stable, you don't argue with yourself about standard. You live them. Command softly now. Stay aligned. That is not a warning. It is grounding. Alignment keeps you centered. When pressure increases, it gives you something to return to. When distractions appear, this chapter is where life stops feeling fragmented. You no longer feel pulled in multiple directions. Your habits reinforce your goals. Your goals reflect your values. That loop creates momentum without stress. Calm. This is what harmony feels like. Not excitement, stability. And stability is powerful. Let's go deeper. Alignment removes emotional noise. When you know what you stand for, decisions become easier. You don't overthink. You don't negotiate endlessly. You ask one question: does this align? And the answer guides you. Build tension again. Living in alignment means saying no. Sometimes quietly, sometimes firmly. Not out of fear, out of clarity. You no longer say yes to things that pull you off course. And that boundary protects your energy. Command again. This is your standard. Standards are not rules imposed from outside. They are agreements you make with yourself. And once established, they remove doubt. You don't wonder what to do. You already know. Relief enters here. You feel lighter because you are no longer pretending, no longer justifying, no longer splitting your energy. You are whole. This wholeness is calm. It doesn't rush. It doesn't seek approval. It moves deliberately. Now empowerment. Alignment gives you quiet authority, not over others, over yourself. You trust your decisions because they come from consistency. Repeat the rhythm. Calm. Alignment simplifies. Tension. Misalignment no longer fits. Command. Stay aligned. Relief. Less friction. Empowerment. More momentum. Transformation peak 3 begins here, because this is where identity locks in permanently. Not through effort, through coherence. Rapid lines, steady and clear. Stay aligned. This is your standard. Stay aligned. This is your standard. This is not pressure. This is grounding. You no longer chase clarity. You live inside it. Rapid lines intensify slightly. Stay aligned. This is your standard. No shortcuts. No excuses. Just alignment. Breathe. Feel the steadiness. This is not a peak of emotion. It is a peak of integration. Release now. Let the intensity soften. Relief deepens. You realize something profound. Life did not become simpler because problems disappeared. Life became simpler because you became consistent. Empowerment returns calmly. You are no longer fragmented. You are directed. And direction creates peace. Now imagine your future days. Challenges will still come. Pressure will still rise. But you will not lose yourself inside them, because alignment brings you back. Final commands for this chapter. Protect your standards. Honor your values. Live what you believe. Stay aligned. This is your standard. Calm, clear, whole. I decide who I become. This chapter closes with harmony, not silence. Alignment. And alignment will carry you through whatever comes next. Chapter 12. habits that force greatness. Breathe. This chapter does not begin with urgency. It begins with certainty, because you are no longer becoming. You are. There was a time when success felt distant, something to chase, something to hope for, something that required perfect conditions. That time is past, not because life became easier, but because you became different. Come now. This chapter is not about doing more. It is about recognizing what already exists. Your habits are no longer experiments. They are foundations. They do not ask permission. They do not wait for emotion. They move, and because they move, progress happens. Here is the truth you've earned. Your habits now demand success, not aggressively, not anxiously, inevitably. Success is no longer something you chase. Chasing implies uncertainty. You no longer live there. You live in expectation, because expectation is built on evidence, and you have evidence. Think back. You showed up when it was quiet. You stayed consistent when no one noticed. You built systems instead of relying on emotion. That work did not disappear. It organized itself. It aligned itself. It matured. Calm again. Greatness is not loud. It is stable. It does not rush. It does not panic. It knows what comes next. This is leadership, not positional, not external, internal leadership, the kind that governs behavior, even when no one is watching. Especially then, let tension rise gently, because this level comes with responsibility. When habits are strong, excuses become irrelevant. When systems are reliable, inconsistency becomes uncomfortable. Not because of guilt, because of identity. You no longer ask, "Can I do this?" You ask, "Why wouldn't I?" That shift matters. Command softly now. Honor what you've built. Your habits are not temporary tools. They are standards. They reflect what you tolerate. They reflect what you expect of yourself. And standards shape outcomes. Relief enters here, because you are no longer forcing greatness. You are maintaining it. Maintenance is calm. Maintenance is sustainable. Maintenance is power. You feel grounded now, not elevated above others. Anchored within yourself. That grounding allows consistency without strain. Empowerment deepens. You begin leading without effort. Your presence stabilizes situations. Your calm influences decisions, not because you speak louder, but because you move with certainty. Now the rhythm accelerates slightly, because this is culmination, not climax. Confirmation. You've learned something essential. Motivation fades. Habits remain. Emotion fluctuates. Structure holds. Confidence wavers. Identity stabilizes. This is who you are now. Someone whose habits demand follow-through. Someone whose systems produce results. Someone whose standards protect progress. Build tension now, because there is one last temptation. The temptation to doubt how far you've come. The temptation to downplay growth. But humility does not require denial. You can be grounded and still acknowledge truth. Here is the truth. You earned this. Say it internally. You earned this. Not through luck, not through shortcuts, through repetition, through discipline, through alignment. Command clearly now. Claim your standard. This does not make you rigid. It makes you reliable. Reliability creates trust. Trust creates leadership. Now relief again. You are no longer proving anything. You are living it, and living it feels simpler than striving ever did. Empowerment rises fully. You trust your habits. You trust your process. You trust yourself. That trust cannot be taken from you. Now the final transformation peak begins. Short lines, clear, decisive. You earned this. This is who you are. Again, you earned this. This is who you are. Feel the steadiness. No rush, no spike, just certainty. Rapid lines continue. You earned this. This is who you are. Walk forward. Say it internally. Walk forward, not dramatically, not aggressively. Forward. The peak stabilizes. This is not an emotional high. This is an identity lock. Release. Let the intensity soften. Calm returns. And with it clarity. You understand something now. Greatness is not an event. It is a consequence. A consequence of habits that do not negotiate. You will still face challenges. You will still experience pressure. But you will not revert, because reverting would violate who you are. Final empowerment. You move through life now with quiet expectation. You do the work. Results follow, not always immediately, but inevitably. Final commands of the book. Honor your habits. Protect your standards. Trust what you've built. You earned this. This is who you are. Walk forward, calm, grounded, certain. I decide who I become. This chapter ends here, not with noise, with presence. And that presence, steady, disciplined, aligned, will carry you forward long after these words fade. You are ready. Breathe. You've reached the end of this journey, but you already know this is not an ending. This is integration. You didn't come here to feel inspired for a moment. You came here to become someone permanent. And that has happened. Look at where you stand now. Not emotionally, factually. You no longer rely on motivation. You no longer wait for perfect conditions. You no longer negotiate with the work. You move, because movement is who you are. There is a quiet victory in that. Not loud, not dramatic, but unshakable. You've built habits that hold you steady, systems that carry you, standards that protect your progress. And because of that, your confidence is no longer fragile. It is grounded. Calm confidence feels different. It doesn't rush to prove itself. It doesn't fear setbacks. It doesn't look back. It simply continues. Now look forward, not with pressure, with expectation. You know what you do tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, because the path is clear, and clarity creates peace. You are not hoping for success. You are positioned for it, and that changes how you walk, how you speak, how you decide. Let these affirmations land naturally. You rise, not suddenly, steadily. You are ready, not because fear is gone, but because discipline remains. You decide who you become every day, without negotiation. This is not hype. This is identity, and identity endures. Carry this forward, quietly, consistently, with self-respect. The world will respond in time, but even if it doesn't, you will keep moving, because this is who you are now. Calm, certain, aligned, and greatness, no longer chased, will meet you on the path you've built. You made it to the end. That already says something about you. Most people stop early. You stayed. If this audiobook challenged you, if it sharpened your focus, if it reminded you of who you're becoming, then don't let this be a one-time moment. This channel exists for people who choose growth, discipline over comfort, clarity over noise, progress over excuses. If you want more audiobooks like this, more mindset training, more leadership, more inner strength, subscribe, like this video so it reaches the people who need it, and share it with someone who's ready to rise but hasn't found the words yet. Stay consistent, protect your mind, and keep moving forward. This is only the beginning.